Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In Springville, a quiet American town, daily routine had been disrupted. Residents whispered in the streets, intrigued by an unexpected event. A 13-year-old boy was about to appear in the local court. Marcus Johnson, a young black boy known for his exceptional intelligence and insatiable curiosity, was no ordinary teenager. Passionate about reading and fascinated by the law, he spent his evenings devouring books on the law, famous trials, and the intricacies of the law. His teachers described him as thoughtful beyond his years, while his friends considered him a true whiz kid. But no one in Springville suspected that this young boy would soon challenge the established order and shock an entire courtroom with his reasoning. What seemed like a minor incident at his school would turn into a masterclass in logic and courage. The day of the trial was approaching. The local newspapers were already talking about the case of the 13-year-old boy, while Marcus, calm and focused, knew that his preparation would make all the difference. For him, it was not just about proving his innocence, but about showing that justice depends neither on age nor appearance, but on truth and logic. And in this quiet little town, no one was ready to see a child stand up to adults with such skill and courage. It was just another morning at Springville Middle School. Marcus Johnson, 13, walked into his technology class with his bag slung over his shoulder. His friends, Tyler Adams and Mia Roberts, were waiting for him by the laptops. Ms. Linda Harper, the technology teacher, gave the day's instructions, an individual programming project. Everything seemed normal, until Ms. Harper's laptop mysteriously disappeared. A few minutes later, panic set in the classroom. The computer was nowhere to be found, and all eyes immediately turned to Marcus. Why him? He was known for being intelligent and curious, but he had never shown the slightest sign of dishonesty. Marcus, where were you when the computer disappeared? Mrs. Harper asked, her voice trembling with worry. I was near the desk, ma'am. I didn't touch it. Marcus replied calmly, though a slight shiver of worry ran through his body. Tyler Adams chimed in, I can confirm he didn't take anything. I saw him working on my project right next to him. Despite Tyler's testimony, suspicions continued to hang over Marcus. The school decided to call the parents and report the incident to local authorities. What Marcus didn't yet know was that this small incident would spark a legal case that would captivate the entire town. Back home, Marcus confided the situation to his older sister, Jessica Johnson, a law student. Jessica, I didn't do anything, but they want to blame me. What should I do? Jessica smiled softly, admiring her brother's maturity. Don't worry, Marcus. If we prepare your defense well and know the law, you can prove your point. And so Marcus began to study with extraordinary concentration, determined to understand every legal detail that might help him defend himself. Little did he know that his reasoning would soon shock an entire court and change Springville forever. After the incident at school, Marcus returned home with a heavy heart but a determined spirit. He knew he had to understand his rights and prepare his defense. In the living room, he sat down at the table with his books and laptop. Jessica, his older sister, arrived a few minutes later. So, Marcus, tell me exactly what happened, she said, sitting down next to him. Marcus explained every detail, Mrs. Harper's suspicious glances, the disappearance of the computer, and the fact that Tyler had supported him. Jessica listened attentively, nodding her head every now and then. Look, she said finally, there are laws that protect minors from accusations based solely on circumstantial evidence or presumptions. If we know them well, we can challenge this accusation. Marcus opened several books on juvenile law and the United States Code of Criminal Procedure. He took notes, highlighted articles, and began to strategize. He discovered, among other things. 1. The presumption of innocence is absolute, even for minors. 2. Circumstantial evidence must be corroborated by concrete elements. 3. Procedures must respect the right to defense, including the right of parents to be informed and involved. Jessica, Marcus asked with a mixture of curiosity and enthusiasm, do you think I could present this myself in court? Jessica smiled proudly. Why not? If you know what you're doing and stay calm, you could really surprise everyone. But you'll have to cite the laws correctly and prepare solid evidence. Over the next few days, Marcus worked tirelessly. He wrote his notes, prepared questions, and practiced courtroom dialogues with Tyler and Mia to prepare for every eventuality. Every detail counted. He knew this trial would be more than just a school case. It was an opportunity to show that justice and truth have no age, and that even a 13-year-old boy could stand up to adults with intelligence and courage. The long-awaited day arrived. The small town of Springville was buzzing with excitement. A 13-year-old boy was about to appear in court. The courtroom was filled with parents, curious residents, and even local reporters who had come to cover the case. Marcus entered, accompanied by his father, David Johnson, and his lawyer, Mr. Henry Clark, a calm and methodical man known for his thoroughness. Tyler and Mia sat in the front row, supporting their friend with their gaze. Judge Robert Wilson, a respected and stern man, banged his gavel to call for order. Quiet in the courtroom. We are about to begin the trial of Marcus Johnson. Marcus's heart was racing, but he remained calm. He had rehearsed this moment hundreds of times with Jessica and his lawyer. His gaze met Tyler's, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. Ms. Karen Lewis, the prosecution lawyer, stood up and stated the facts. Your Honor, the defendant is suspected of stealing a laptop belonging to Ms. Harper. The evidence, although circumstantial, points to Marcus Johnson. Judge Wilson turned to Marcus. Marcus, would you like to make a statement before we begin the presentation of evidence? Marcus took a deep breath. Every word he spoke had to be chosen carefully. Your Honor, he said calmly, I did not take the computer. And I believe some of the evidence presented against me violates my rights as a juvenile. The room was struck by this mixture of maturity and confidence in such a young boy. Even Mrs. Lewis seemed slightly unsettled. Mr. Clark, his lawyer, nodded approvingly. He knew Marcus had a clear vision of his defense. Tensions rose as the judge announced, All right, we'll consider the evidence and hear the testimony. But I warn you, young man, your arguments must be precise and logical. Marcus stood up, ready to prove that age was irrelevant when it came to truth and justice. Every eye in this courtroom was now on him, and everyone was about to discover that a 13-year-old boy could truly surprise an entire courtroom. The decisive moment had arrived. Marcus was called to the stand. His hands were shaking slightly, but his mind remained clear and focused. All eyes in the courtroom were on him, the judge, the prosecution, his colleagues, and even the reporters. Your Honor, I wish to present my defense, Marcus began confidently. Ms. Karen Lewis, the prosecution lawyer, gave a condescending smile. She'd expected a child to stammer and get lost in his words. But Marcus was ready. I would first like to point out that, according to American juvenile law, any accusation must be based on direct and incontestable evidence, he said calmly. He quoted a specific article of the legal code, Article 45, Section B, stipulates that circumstantial evidence cannot suffice to establish the guilt of a minor without substantial corroboration. A murmur rippled through the room. Judge Wilson frowned, puzzled. Marcus continued, The only evidence against me is circumstantial testimony and supposition. There's no concrete evidence that I took the computer. Mrs. Lewis stood up to answer, trying to unsettle him, Mr. Johnson, you are a child. How can you understand these laws better than the adults around you? Marcus was not intimidated. Because I have studied the law and understand that justice depends not on age, but on truth. I am not seeking to challenge adults, but to show that facts must prevail over assumptions. Judge Wilson took serious notes. Even the prosecution lawyer seemed surprised by Marcus's precision and logic. The audience was speechless. Never before had a child spoken with such mastery and confidence in a courtroom. At that moment, it became clear to everyone that Marcus was no mere defendant, he was a young defender of justice, capable of turning a situation around with solid, thoughtful arguments. The tension in the room rose, and everyone wondered how the prosecution would respond to such an unexpected opponent. Judge Wilson leaned across his desk and examined Marcus with growing curiosity. It was rare for such a young defendant to understand the intricacies of legal evidence. Marcus spoke again calmly and decisively. "Your Honor, allow me to challenge some of the evidence that has been presented against me." He pointed to the school's surveillance report. "The surveillance video only shows a student near Miss Harper's desk, but it doesn't prove that I took the computer. It doesn't show my hands taking the object or any suspicious movements." A silence fell over the room. Even Mrs. Lewis, visibly annoyed, paused before answering. Marcus continued, "Furthermore, some of the students' testimonies were collected without the presence of my parents or my lawyer, which constitutes a violation of my rights under Article 12 of the Code of Procedure for Minors." Judge Wilson rolled his eyes, impressed by Marcus's precision. The audience murmured among themselves, "How can a 13-year-old boy understand all this?" Marcus then pulled out a copy of the notebook of one of the student witnesses. This student admitted in his journal that, out of fear of being scolded, he lied about my participation. "This is the document I am submitting as evidence." The judge examined the notebook carefully. Even the prosecution's lawyer could not deny the importance of this evidence. Marcus had demonstrated that not only was the evidence insufficient, but that there was concrete evidence to challenge the charges. He concluded confidently, "Your Honor, I am not seeking to challenge the authority of adults, but I am asking that the truth prevail over assumptions and that the rights of a minor be respected." At that precise moment, it became clear to everyone that Marcus was not just intelligent, he was strategic, methodical, and able to defend his own innocence with reasoning that many adults would have envied. After Marcus's demonstration, Ms. Karen Lewis, the prosecution's attorney, stood up to try to regain control of the situation. She believed she could unsettle the young boy with rapid-fire, insistent questions. "Marcus Johnson," she said, "you're just a child. How can you understand the complexity of these laws and know what evidence is valid and what is not?" Marcus replied calmly, without losing his confidence, "Because I have studied the code, and because I understand that justice is not based on age but on truth and facts." Ms. Lewis frowned and tried a new tactic. "And what about the other students' accounts? They all indicated that you were near the desk when the computer disappeared." Marcus then produced a document no one expected, an email from his friend Tyler Adams, who confirmed that he had been near Marcus but that Marcus had never touched the computer. He also added that other students had been influenced by the fear of being told off and had changed their statements. Judge Wilson spoke, visibly impressed. "I must admit, Marcus, that your arguments are precise and that you have anticipated the most critical points of the prosecution." Even Ms. Lewis, though experienced, was beginning to lose her composure. She had never seen a 13-year-old defendant prepare such a thorough and methodical defense. Marcus continued, "Your Honor, I request that every testimony be considered in light of this information, and that the proceedings respect the juvenile's right to a fair hearing." The entire room held its breath. The 13-year-old boy was no longer just a defendant, he had become a legal strategist, able to anticipate and counter the objections of a seasoned lawyer. At that precise moment, it was clear to everyone that this trial would not be a mere formality. Marcus had just transformed a banal incident into a masterclass in law, logic, and courage in the face of injustice. As the prosecution attorney seemed to catch his breath, Marcus pulled a new document from his file. The courtroom leaned forward, curious. "Your Honor, I would like to present additional evidence," Marcus announced. He held out an open notebook and a printed email from one of the student witnesses, Jake Miller. The email revealed that Jake had initially lied to protect another student and avoid punishment. He clearly confessed that Marcus had never touched the computer and that he had been falsely accused out of fear of retaliation. Judge Wilson examined the document carefully. Murmurs rippled through the room. No one expected such a revelation from a 13-year-old boy. Marcus continued, "Your Honor, this evidence shows that the testimony presented against me is not only indirect, but also influenced by fear and social pressure." Mrs. Lewis tried to retort, "But that's just an after-the-fact testimony." Marcus replied calmly, "Exactly, ma'am. And that is why it must be taken into account when reassessing the validity of the accusations. Ignoring this evidence would be ignoring the truth." Judge Wilson placed his hand on his chin, impressed by the boy's logic and maturity. Even Marcus's parents, sitting in the courtroom, were amazed. They had never imagined that their son could not only defend himself, but turn the tables with such skill. At that moment, it became clear that Marcus had transformed a simple school incident into a masterful display of strategy and courage. He was no longer just a defendant, he had become the master of his own defense, and everyone in the courtroom knew that the verdict would be influenced by his intelligence and insight. Silence reigned in the courtroom. Every eye was fixed on Marcus. Judge Robert Wilson, a man known for his rigor and impartiality, put down his glasses and looked at the boy carefully. "Marcus Johnson," he said in a deep but curious voice, "you have presented arguments and evidence that even some adults struggle to understand. How did you acquire such knowledge at your age?" Marcus took a deep breath and replied with surprising maturity for a 13-year-old. "Your Honor, I believe that justice is not dependent on age. Ever since I was little, I have loved understanding how laws work and how they protect people. I just wanted to make sure the truth was respected, even for a boy my age." The judge gave a small, impressed smile. "Very good. Your clarity and logic are remarkable. I want to commend your courage and preparation." Ms. Lewis, the prosecution lawyer, was visibly unsettled. Her previous attempts to intimidate Marcus had failed. She could only admit that he had anticipated all her objections with a relentless strategy. The spectators in the courtroom murmured among themselves, "A 13-year-old boy, and yet he knows the law better than some adults." Marcus, calmly and confidently, concluded, "Your Honor, I am not trying to appear superior. I simply want justice to prevail over assumptions and for the facts to be properly examined." The judge nodded. "Very well. We will now proceed to deliberation, but it is clear that your arguments and evidence have significantly influenced this case. In that room, a lesson had just been taught: maturity and preparation can surpass age and experience." Marcus had not only defended his innocence, but had also taught everyone present that truth and justice can come from a young and determined mind. After hours of deliberation, the court reconvened. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Marcus's parents, David and Jessica Johnson, held hands, anxious but proud of their son. Tyler and Mia gazed at Marcus in admiration, while the prosecution's attorney, Ms. Karen Lewis, appeared concerned. Judge Robert Wilson banged his gavel for order. Silence in the courtroom. "After reviewing the evidence and hearing the arguments of all parties, I render my verdict." All eyes turned to Marcus. His heart was racing, but his face remained calm and confident. The judge continued. "In light of the evidence presented, including the documentation provided by the accused himself, and the careful analysis of the testimony, I find Marcus Johnson not guilty of the charge of theft." A murmur of astonishment and admiration rippled through the room. Marcus's parents burst into joy, while Tyler and Mia nearly jumped with happiness. Even some of the townspeople who had doubted Marcus couldn't help but applaud. Ms. Lewis looked down, aware that Marcus had presented an exceptional defense. The judge added, "I want to emphasize that this child's maturity and preparation are exemplary. Marcus Johnson has demonstrated that age is no barrier to understanding and defending rights." Marcus took a deep breath, relieved and proud. He had not only proven his innocence, but had also shown everyone that truth and justice could triumph, even against experienced opponents. Reporters frantically took notes, and soon the story of the 13-year-old boy who had shocked the court was making headlines in local newspapers and on social media. Marcus had just become an example of courage, intelligence, and determination for the entire community. A few days after the trial, Springville was still in shock. The story of Marcus Johnson, the 13-year-old boy who had astonished an entire courtroom with his logic and mastery of the law, was circulating everywhere. The local newspapers ran the headlines, "The boy who shook the court," and social media was all about him. Marcus returned to his school routine, but he was no longer the same. His classmates looked at him with a mixture of respect and admiration, while his teachers were impressed by his exceptional maturity. Tyler and Mia continued to support him, proud of their friend who had just proven that intelligence and preparation can surpass age and experience. His parents, David and Jessica Johnson, were immensely proud. Jessica, in particular, saw Marcus not only as her little brother, but as a future young lawyer, perhaps even a defender of juvenile rights. "You've shown everyone that truth and justice have no age," she told him, giving him a hug. Judge Wilson invited Marcus back to the courthouse a few weeks later for a special event. He wanted to publicly recognize his courage and ability to understand the law at such a young age. Marcus was honored in front of the entire town, and his example inspired many young people to take an interest in the law and stand up for what is right. Marcus knew this wasn't just a case he'd won. He'd shown that determination, preparation, and courage could change perceptions, even in the face of experienced adults. In the small town of Springville, he'd become a local legend, the 13-year-old boy who'd shocked the courtroom and taught everyone a valuable lesson: justice and truth are available to everyone, regardless of age. And so, Marcus Johnson continued his life with renewed confidence, ready to face every challenge with the same intelligence, determination, and courage that had made him an example to his community and beyond.